What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today I've got for you part 3 in the Bat Crazy Betty saga. That's right, you guys have absolutely loved part 1 and part 2, and the story, if anything, just gets crazier from here. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll put part 1's thumbnail on screen there, part 2's there. You need to go and watch that before you watch this one, otherwise none of that will make sense. Links down below. I'm now assuming you've seen part 1 and part 2. This is part 3. Just one story today, but my goodness me, it includes the worst paragraph I think I've ever read in my life. So without further ado, sit back, relax, subscribe to the channel, and turn notifications on so you don't miss future episodes in this series. Let's get into this ridiculous story. Bat Crazy Betty comes a-calling after 2 years of blissful silence, and I'm not happy about it. What's up, lovelies? In my last post, I told you all that Dan and I didn't speak to Betty for 2 years after we left her house following our wedding. We were still living in my parents' house, mostly to save up as much money as we could, but we'd just found a rental property on the far end of town and we'd signed the lease. It was a bit outdated than what we were looking for, but it was within our budget and within the city limits, so we went for it. As Dan and I were packing, he gets a call on his phone. It's Betty. I, of course, didn't want him to answer it, but he did anyway. Dang it. He at least put it on speaker while he was still unpacking. Hi, Mum. Long time. Yes, it has been. I was just calling to see how you were doing. I'm fine, just living life as usual, you know? Of course. I'm so glad to hear your voice, Dan. I miss you so much. Dan just sighed. I miss you too, Mum. How is everything? Well, you know, life is life. Are you and what's her name still together? What's her name? Seriously? I wanted to say something, but Dan waved a hand and stopped me. Yes, we are. We're moving into a place together soon. Betty got quiet. Oh, well, that's good, I guess. Listen, I could really use some help if you don't mind. I said quietly. Here we go. Dan just shook his head and shushed me. Rude. What is it? Well, I just got a new computer for work and I need help setting it up. Do you think you could swing by and help me out for an hour or two? I gave Dan a look, like, seriously? We'd planned to have the moving van loaded up by 5 so we could have dinner with my parents at 6 at a restaurant in town. Him going to his mum's would have put a dent into those plans. And this is his mother we're talking about. I wasn't keen on him and her speaking just yet, so I was silently pleading with Dan to say no, shaking my head and mouthing no to him. He was staring at me, looking worried. I mean, if it won't take more than 2 hours, I guess I can help. F! I stood up and walked out of the room in a huff. Dan got his shoes on and grabbed his keys. He was apologizing to me as he was walking out, and he promised to be back in 2 hours. Dear reader, do you think Dan came back in 2 hours? If you said no, you'd be right. I ended up going to the restaurant alone to meet my parents. To avoid getting them upset, I told them that Dan got called into work. I sat mostly in silence as my parents talked about their recent cases, but I would answer questions if asked. I would casually change the subject if they brought up Dan, trying to avoid the topic as it got me upset. I kept looking over at the empty chair beside me, getting angrier and more upset by the minutes. My parents told me they had a gift for me and Dan. They handed me a check for $2,500 and a box covered in wrapping paper. I opened it and it was a ruby crystal pendulum. Oh, that's sick. A little backstory for me and my family, but in each generation, when the daughters have moved out into their own home, the mother gifts them with a crystal pendulum of their birthstone to hang over the bedroom door. That's awesome. My great-great-grandmother had started this, and it's a tradition I plan to keep if I have a daughter of my own. I, of course, forced a smile and thanked my wonderful parents for such thoughtful gifts. By the time dinner was over, I just wanted to cry. I drove back to my parents' house to find Dan waiting for me in the bedroom. He looked frustrated and upset. I asked him what happened. It was like no time had passed at all. Betty was still just as crazy as she was 2 years ago. The moment he arrived, she came barreling out of the door and clung to him like a parasite. She refused to let go as he tried prying her hands off him. When he asked about the computer, she said she'd made up the whole thing just to get him to come over. Because, of course she did. Well, if she made it all up, why didn't you come straight back? I asked. I could tell by the look on his face that he was thinking about lying, likely to avoid annoying me, but it was already too late for that. I gave him a stern look and I told him not to BS me. He sighed and admitted the truth. He went into how Betty started acting like a cat in heat, comparing him to his father and blatantly flirting with him, even trying to get him to cuddle in her bed with her. This story gets weirder and weirder. She also started comparing herself to me. Things like she is a better cook and that I must not be feeding him well enough because he's too skinny and looks sickly. She asked if my breasts were nice and asked him if hers looked nice in her new shirt she had got just to wear for him. What is happening here? She berated him for having tattoos and piercings, saying I must have convinced him to ruin his perfect skin. She started asking questions about our sex life, wondering if his needs were being met. She said she had left his bedroom exactly as he had it and that if he came back home, he could be her baby boy again. That is the most disgusting paragraph I've ever read. I felt sick to my stomach and told him to stop talking, that I'd heard enough. The second she started acting like that, he should have left and cut contact again. He agreed and apologized, but I was too annoyed to accept that. I laid into him. He missed dinner with my parents to go and cater to that psycho. It wasn't fair that he left me to deal with packing alone, and we're stuck with paying for an additional day now, which is eating into our budget. He got angry and told me to take my head out of my butt, that not everything has to be on my terms, and that if he wants to talk to his mother, he will, and he doesn't need my permission. He stormed out and I didn't see him until the next morning. That was the first time we really fought like that. Wow. He came with flowers and an apology. We talked about it. He said he didn't appreciate his mother's behavior, but he felt he'd abandoned her for 2 years, and without him, she'd gotten worse. He said he hoped with some time she might agree to get therapy. I was naturally skeptical. I explained my concerns and he agreed with me, but asked me to be patient with him while he tries to work things out with her. And he asked me to try forming a relationship with her too. I was hesitant, but because I love him and I want our marriage to work, I compromised. I said I would try, but my interactions with her would be extremely limited, as in to holidays and occasional phone calls or visits. He agreed. We both then agreed that if she started with the weird behavior, he would leave immediately and put her on a timeout. This is roughly where the cycle of week-long timeouts and her insincere apologies started. Score for me because Betty refused to let me come to any holidays or birthdays on her side of the family once she came back into our lives. Holidays are for family, she'd say. As if I hadn't been married to her son for 2 years by this point, but whatever. I didn't care as I preferred quiet holidays over grand spectacles anyway. Dan wasn't happy, but I told him it was fine. I could just celebrate with my parents. I have IBS, so stress and anxiety give me horrible stomach pains, and I'm literally summoning demons for hours, promising to sell my soul to the devil to end my suffering. Dan has recorded these sessions and replayed them for me a few times. It's quite comical. Being around Betty for any length of time causes my stress to go through the roof, and I'm having to rush to the bathroom. Things seemed to calm down for a while until Christmas that year. My parents had rented a cabin in Colorado and invited Dan and I to join them. When Dan told Betty, she insisted we include her too. We were hesitant, but my parents, being good people, extended an invitation. I'll write about what happened in my next post. Until next time, lovelies. Now guys, I really don't want to leave you on a cliffhanger, but that next story that OP's referenced here about their trip to Colorado is absolutely insane. It's an extended story. It's very long. If I include it in this episode as well, this episode will just be extremely long, probably too long. So I'm going to give it to you in its own episode because I honestly feel it deserves it. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel with notifications on so you don't miss that episode. It's not coming tomorrow on Sunday. I'm going to post it on Monday. Sunday I like to have as the movie day, you know, the long one for you guys to just put in the background, relax to, chill out, whatever it is that you do while listening to me. Monday we'll be back though with the rest of this series, starting with that trip to Colorado. I've got it on screen now. Goodness me, it's an absolute doozy. Now, as for the story that I have just read, I do have some comments about that. Namely, that was the worst paragraph I've ever read in my life. And actually, OP is making me look silly when I said the other day in the first episode that maybe Betty was just jealous of Dan leaving home and growing up. Yeah, she is a little bit like that, but there's a lot more to it than that, clearly. I mean, this stuff about her husband dying early is extremely sad, but then trying to have what you had with your husband with your son is great. Like, it's just disgusting. Like, asking do her breasts look nice. Like, oh, imagine you as a mum comparing your son's wife's breast to yours. Does it get much worse than that? I'm just not sure it does. But anyway, guys, that is going to do it for this one. Just a short one. I'm sorry, but when you see the next episode in this series, it will make sense. If you haven't seen part 1 or part 2, I'll put part 1 on screen here, part 2 down here, and you have to hit this button, subscribe with notifications on, so you know when I post the next episode in this series.